Welcome to DIA Today, Democracy in America Today. I'm Matt Parks alongside Dave Corbin. Glad to have you with us as we explore the ideas behind today's headlines.
My left eye sees pollution. Those dirty fuels are burning. The earth's whole climate's churning. Clean energy solution. My right eye scans the bill. Fossil fuels are cheap. Wind and solar too steep. Drill, baby, drill. Predefined, misaligned, polarized division. Shuttered mind, worse than blind. 2020 vision.
So first day of school in the books, Dave.
No, first day as a head of school, K through 12. First time also addressing kinder through second grade students, so who I think may be an easier audience than college students, but it was okay. Fun. It was great. Yeah. It was really it's something else just to see like little ducklings, when they met their teacher, just like following out and in perfect line.
Yep.
Something happens along the way between the age of 5 and 18 where it's not that easy to have them follow you. But it's pretty neat. I told a couple people that, you imagine if you were at a place for 12 years and to be able to see the transformation and growth in a little 5-year-old up until when they graduated, it would make that commencement, that much more something to cherish. So knowing a kid for 13 years, never mind the fact that we're blessed to have Eliza and Jack here at the school as well. So all good. How about you? How's New York City?
Yeah, good. Well, we started as well at King's last Thursday, which wasn't the best day to begin, the day after the big storm came through. And so we actually had to start remotely with our first day of class, quite contrary to our plans and hopes. But faculty, very flexible, students, very flexible, staff figured it all out. I guess we've gotten good at this over the last year and a half, although there were some pretty harrowing tales of people trying to return home from convocation last Wednesday night. And one guy on the faculty had to spend the night in a commuter train. Another had his train turn around and had to spend the night in a hotel, and lots of basements and ceilings and things like that. So it was tough, and people were, in some cases are still recovering from that. But amazingly, through all that, we've had a pretty good start to the semester. So we're very thankful for God's care and grace through that, even through the difficulties.
Great. And our big football draft on Monday, which also happened to be my anniversary. So I got a little bit of criticism for doing the fantasy draft on but it was raining. There were thunderstorms. So we couldn't go out. So I had an excuse that way.
You managed. I didn't realize we were making you make that choice, but okay. I'm glad you navigated it successfully. And I think your team came out pretty good. I feel all right about where I landed. We'll see. Last year, I felt good coming out of the draft, and then two of my first 4 picks basically missed the whole year with injuries. Managed to figure it out through the waiver wires and get a good team by the end. But the draft always seems so important in the moment, but when you look back on the year, it's often the case that your best players are ones you picked up along the way. We're matched up this first week, so we'll get an early test to see which team's stronger. They're projecting me for a big win by almost 2 full points. So basically, it's in the bag. I assume you're still going to play, Dave, but I'm not sure what the point is.
That's right. I don't know. That's why they play a game on Sunday, right? You never know.
Well, why don't we turn to our required reading? And we are moving along in Book 2 of the Politics. Today, we're looking at chapters 7 and 8, Dave, as Aristotle takes up a couple of more theorists of the ancient Greek world.
Yeah, so building off of what he had written on Socrates' proposal to have a community of wives and a community of property in Plato's Republic, Aristotle takes up the offering of a person that we don't know much about, named Phileas, who suggests that really to solve the problem of politics, to solve the problem of human affairs, there's a simple solution. The solution is equalize property. So if everyone had private property, but everyone had the same amount of private property, then everyone would get along. And what would happen is you would have an end to faction as we know it. And it's a really interesting proposal because I think it asks us to consider, does everything really rest, does all tension in our political communities, does it rest upon the disparity of property amongst people? So if you got rid of this haves and have-nots, and everyone kind of had the same, so there would be no thinking that someone has more than me, would you then be able to solve the political problem? And of course, Aristotle has a problem with this, and his problem, as he explains in chapter 7, is that there's more that moves us than simply property, that we are moved by our love of honor. We are moved by our love of wisdom. We are moved by a variety of things. So it's not simply property that defines us, but there are other things that define us as human beings. What do you make of both the proposal put out there by Philaius and Aristotle's rejection of it in chapter 7?
Right. Well, I think the first point on the desire to equalize property, of course, is a common proposal to one degree or another, at least in our contemporary politics, and has been for the last 150 years. You can take the extreme versions of that. And in Marxism, obviously, that involves transcending private property altogether, but maybe more mainstream progressive proposals that go back 100 or 120 years, where an effort to focus on income inequality is really a prominent part of our politics. So I think this is one of those issues where, this proposal is something that's very live and lively today. And I think Aristotle gives us a nice critique of it. And what I would say is really a conservative critique in the broad sense, recognizing that human nature is not driven merely by desire for property, that our differences are not entirely grounded in that. And on the other side, that if you were to equalize property, not everyone would be satisfied with that, that there would be a sense on some people's part that they deserve more than an equal share. And so as a matter of establishing a peace, right, if we all had the same, there wouldn't be the necessity of comparing myself and finding myself wanting, looking at somebody else, but I might still have an idea in my mind that says, yeah, but I actually deserve more. I'm working harder than this person. I'm more talented than this person. I've done things that merit a greater measure of success. And whether that's just my subjective view that's perhaps colored by my own personal interest, or whether that's maybe more objectively the case, nevertheless, the rivalries, the factions, the divisions that Philaius is trying to transcend would reemerge under different colors.
Well, it's kind of interesting too. I mean, you can do this thought experiment. Say you focused on this proposal applied to the United States. If you look at the net worth of all households and nonprofits in the United States in the first quarter of 2021, you come out to $137 trillion. So that's the overall wealth in the country today. And if you were to divide that 137 trillion by 340 million, what then would every individual have within the country? What's 137 trillion divided by 340 million off the top of your head, Matt?
I think about 400,000.
You were the math major in college. Didn't know you were going to be quizzed today, did you? So basically that would give every individual in the country, so every family of four would now have $1.6 million. So that would be all of their assets, whether it's their retirement, their houses, what they had in their bank, et cetera. So that's day one of this thought experiment. What happens day two, Matt?
People start to trade. People start to buy and sell and engage in economic activity. And all of a sudden, that balance begins to shift.
So you might have within a week, right, some people with 500,000, other people that took some of their 400,000 and spent 200,000 of it right away, and they have 200. So you'd have to have a mechanism within this equal distribution, whereby on a monthly basis you are bringing things back to that even number, which shows you, how impossible this is to do. And I think what it also shows you, right, is that there's a problem here when you solely focus on property, because there are other things that move us, other things that make us do what we do within a political community, that make us do what we do within life, that our sole focus is not simply on property.
Yeah. And again, I think to go back to maybe different categories of human sin, envy is the kind of problem that you're trying to address by equalizing things, but there's also the problem of pride. And again, people are not satisfied with equality if they think they deserve more than equality. So you can get rid of envy, and all you do is create new faction and division based upon pride.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's going on here is it's oversimplifying politics. And what I always do with my class is I said, there's a truth, right, that the fall shows us about politics, about human nature. But if all you did was define human nature and your conception of politics along the lines of the fall, then you'd have half the picture of human life. But you can make the same problem. You can have the same problem from the other direction. Just look at politics simply from the perspective of redemption, but not recognizing the fall. What true sight about human things requires is the recognition that, yes, we are fallen, but we can be redeemed. And I think that this plays easily into the property equation, because what someone like Phileas is trying to do is he's trying to suggest that the reason why there's a lack of peace within the political community, the reason why there's a fall, is because there's inequality of property. And then he proposes, right, an earthly redemption based upon equalizing that property. But the reality, right, is there's so much more to the fall, right, than simply the issue of people having more than another. And there's so much more to what true redemption is than simply an earthly mechanism that can solve all things.
Right. And it brings me back to the opening line of de Tocqueville, as he talks about the equality of conditions in the United States. And that was an equality of conditions that didn't come about through some artificial mechanism forcing the equalization of property, but through some basic laws that encouraged over time the division of large fortunes. As, say, if you have 3 or 4 children, then you give them an equal share rather than forcing the fortune to remain in the firstborn son's hands, as you would in an aristocratic kind of community. But there were a few basic laws that created the context for a dynamic society that tended toward equality, that tended to reduce the extremes, because often those extremes are not the result of market forces, but the intervention of government, that government action that creates monopolies or preserves monopolies for individuals or certain businesses actually is where the extremities come from often, or efforts to aid the poor that might trap them in poverty and make it difficult for them to escape that condition over time. So I think one of the things that Aristotle is pointing us to here more broadly is just the complexity of these matters. And like you were saying at the very beginning, there's just no silver bullet for solving the problem of human faction and division. And even if you were to solve one dimension of that problem, you're very likely in doing that to create a whole bunch of other problems that you haven't anticipated, and that perhaps may be worse and create deeper and more permanent divisions in your community.
Yeah, and Aristotle will give somewhat of an answer on this question of what to do with property about halfway through this chapter 7. So, what remedy is there when we're dealing with property? And he said, for the one, a minimum of property and work. For the other, moderation. And for the third, if certain persons should want enjoyment through themselves alone, they should not seek a remedy except in connection with philosophy. So this minimum amount of property and work, moderation, and then an outlet in philosophy, which in the American case, the case that you just described in Tocqueville, would be the outlet in faith. So you do see kind of all of these things coming together in the American model in the 17th and 18th century. As you said, naturally, they're not kind of put into place by legislation per se, although there are mores that are formed and that are conditioned by having certain rules of life. But people are basically working and doing the things that they need to survive, and that produces a type of peace in and of itself. And then on the next page, he goes on to say that also important in this whole equation is that, quote, those who are respectable by nature will be the sort who have no wish to aggrandize themselves. So there needs to be a certain modeling by the leadership class also to make this work in terms of unequal distribution of property. Well, let's move on then. Take up the second proposal in chapter 8, and it's produced by a man named Hippodamus, who we get a sense, was a real person who was kind of a flashy sort of individual. Aristotle says that he was an overdone manner with long hair and expensive ornaments, kind of like you, Matt. Like, this Hippodamus kind of reminds me of kind of an earlier Matt Parks in his 20s.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I read Aristotle's Politics, this guy really drew my eye, and I thought that's the life I want to live. So, I've had to mature a little bit in the years since, grew the beard in place of the long hair. But yeah, I mean, Hippodamus was my model for quite some time.
Yeah, I do wear the same cheap and warm clothing regardless of season. I mean, there are things here that he describes that was Matt as a young man, but
cheap anyway. I don't know about the warm. Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, the character, kidding aside, the character of Hippodamus is an interesting one. He strikes me as an individual, and we know individuals. I have an answer for that. What if we just do X? And what we really need to do is we need to change the optics of this situation. It's an easy division. We'll take the city, we'll make the number 10,000, we'll divide them into three groups. And then it's this political consultant that has kind of an answer for everything as long as you can master the optics of a situation. And I think what Aristotle comes up with at the end is that this type of individual who's trying to kind of manage politics through optics is going to encourage a transience to things whereby laws change from one to the next, from 1 year to the next, and there's no stability to the political society. So a different offering than in chapter 7, but one that still has problems. What do you make of Hippodamus's proposal and Aristotle's response to it, Matt? Yeah,
well, the idea of politics being about optics is so prevalent today. I mean, I think it's just striking how much of the political analysis you read in mainstream outlets is just about that. Right? It's about perceptions. It's about, well, how do you manage this problem, right? Afghanistan's a disaster. So we're going to try to pivot to talking about the economy because we think the economy is a better narrative. Leave aside the fact that there are hundreds of people that are left behind in Afghanistan who are actually in danger of death. If Americans aren't focused on that, we're okay. We'll just move on to the next issue and hope that something else will catch their eye. And of course, you can be successful to a certain degree in politics that way. Unfortunately, our attention spans are short and we are too easily distracted. But it's such a cynical view, ultimately, of politics, and really quite contrary, obviously, to the model of living well that is at the heart of Aristotelian statesmanship, as you use prudence to guide a community toward its best version of itself. It's appropriate virtue for that regime. This is anything but that. And it's the kind of sophistry that Plato and Aristotle set themselves against consistently over the course of their philosophical careers. And so I think, it's a strong critique by Aristotle. And as you say, this kind of instability that results from this is another thing we see quite commonly in our politics today. The idea that longstanding traditions, the filibuster or 9 Supreme Court justices, these are things that, in the convenience of the hour or for the sake of some perceived important political exigency, have to just set by the wayside. And, we'll see what happens. But no doubt it'll be fine because the good thing that we're aiming at through that will be so important that whatever we lose in the stability of our political order will be unimportant in comparison. I think there's another kind of important sort of insight on this that says, no, you meddle with the laws carefully. Recognize that stability is a feature of a legal regime that lasts and that provides peace and order. And this kind of approach that we see critiqued in chapter 8 leaves us in a very precarious situation.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one of the things that Aristotle is getting across here is the importance of organic change, right? That we always have this temptation to want to innovate because we can make something better, but beware, those innovations may be to the benefit of the innovator if they're trying to gain attention to themselves. So we go back to this idea of changing optics, but will not be good for the community itself. So I think that this proposal, we learn by the end of it, the reason why Aristotle is so harsh on Hippodamus. Hippodamus's proposal to innovate in such a way is about Hippodamus, gaining honor. He says further into the chapter, concerning the matter of those who discover something advantageous for the city, to legislate that they receive some honor is not safe, though it sounds appealing. It would involve harassments, and it might well happen changes of regime. So it really places the focus on what's good for the innovator rather than what's good for the regime, what's good for Hippodamus rather than what's good for Hippodamus's city. And in doing so, I think this is a good sign of what's wrong with our politics today. There are a lot of people who talk because they want to be on TV, and they want to stay on TV, and they want to make large sums of money sounding like they know what they're talking about. But at the end of the day, if all of their focus is on their innovation and their optics, then we're not going to get a type of politics that is along the lines of Aristotelian statesman.
Yeah, I think that's just unfortunately a problem left and right today. This kind of celebrity political culture that's emerged, whether it's on your MSNBC and Fox News evening programs, or it's Twitter and the spats back and forth. But there's all this effort to raise one's profile, and doing that by saying provocative things and speaking to one's political or ideological base, and sort of drumming up energy and enthusiasm in that way. And of course, in order to keep that enthusiasm and energy going, you've got to keep moving. We'll wrap up the discussion for today there. Next week, we will wrap up Book 2 as we finish this consideration of other accounts of the best regime, and then we'll begin to work through Aristotle's own positive account beginning in Book 3. Now let's transition to Tocqueville's Crystal Ball. Reminder, we record episodes on Wednesday morning, so it's a couple of days between when we record and when it's actually published, and so that's why we don't always comment on the latest news item. But we also want to emphasize that today, because we are making these NFL predictions before the first game has been played. So we don't know whether the Bucks or the Cowboys will be 1-0 after tomorrow night's first game. So Dave, we're looking at the AFC and NFC East. Last year, you recall the NFC East was historically bad. Every team under 500. Washington football team was 7-9. Giants and Cowboys 6-10. Eagles 4-11-1. AFC East was historically different. After the Patriots' long run at the top of that division, they were only 7-9. The Bills won the division at 13-3, Dolphins 10-6, and of course the Jets were horrific, which is why they got the number 2 pick at 2-14. So we're going to make our predictions for those two divisions, and then we're also going to talk quickly through our playoff predictions all the way to the Super Bowl. So Dave, why don't you lead us off with your calls for the AFC East?
So I think that the Bills will take the division, as hard as that is for me to say. I think that they just have a great organization, a great coach, Sean McDermott. They're coached well. They don't make mistakes. They're the type of team that is really hard to beat in the regular season. And I think, moreover, they have in their quarterback, Josh Allen, Brett Favre 2.0. So I think that they're going to win a lot of games. I'm going to put them at 14-3. The Patriots, I believe, will be competitive in the division. I think that they'll probably win one of the two games against the Bills. But I think, moreover, they'll get a real good surprise by Mac Jones. I think they'll see that he really is going to be an outstanding quarterback. And I think that offense will be able to do 10 times the amount of things that it did last year, which wasn't that much. I'm not sold on the Dolphins. I think Flores is a great coach, but I think more than anything else, I'm not sold on their quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see as that progresses, whether Miami will be getting ready for the Deshaun Watson quarterbacking the team in the future. And I think the Jets are just 3-4 years away. They had a horrible roster, so it's going to take a while for them to get in a better position. So, and they're real. I think this is one of the stronger divisions in football. So I put the Jets at 3-14. So Bills 14-3, Patriots 11-6, Dolphins 7-10, and then the Jets 3-14. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, I got the same order as you. The record's a little bit different, but not very different. I've got the Bills one fewer win at 13-4. I agree. Josh Allen's great. Very strong offense. Defense is solid. I think they're strong contenders to go all the way. Patriots, definitely better. I think there's going to be some rookie ups and downs with Mac Jones. There's no question about that, but I think he's going to be a good quarterback, strong defense. So I have the Patriots at 10-7, Dolphins 8-9. That'll be a disappointment coming off of last year's 10-6. But I agree, Tua is just not going to be enough for them. And Jets, I'm a little more optimistic at 5-12. I think Zach Wilson, again, will show that he's a solid NFL quarterback, but there's just a big talent gap that they've got to fill. And like you say, it's going to be a few years before they can do that.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about all these quarterbacks that got drafted in that first round, I think that what's going to happen is we're going to have kind of a repeat of that great draft that took place in the early 80s where I forgot it was Marino and 3 or 4 others who just came out all at the same time. I think Lawrence is great. Wilson is a terrific quarterback. I think Trey Lance is going to be a great quarterback. So I think it's exciting and that these guys will probably have the chance to play sooner than later. And we saw last year with Joe Burrow, right, that if you really have the talent and you're put in a situation where you have some pieces around you, you can win games. So
yeah, and Herbert as well had a great rookie year. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a possibility we're going to go 5 for 5, which would be good for the NFL. So how about the NFC East, Dave?
I have the Washington football team taking the division at 10-7. I almost had them in 11-6 because it's such an easy division. Fitzmagic, right, as they call him, is on his 9th team. I think he's just proven over time that as long as he can throw deep downfield, he's going to win 3 or 4 games on his own. He's going to lose 1 or 2 as well. But I think that they take the division. I think the Cowboys will be better this year with Prescott back. Their defense can't help but get better than it was last year, and they have a new coordinator and a couple new pieces. So I have them tied with the Redskins for the division lead. And then
that's
just
the football team, I think you meant.
Did I say? Yeah. So the football team. Exactly. I have the Giants at 4-13 and the Eagles at 3-14. So it won't be a good season for Philadelphia fans. And my neighbor next door, my COO, Mike Zavada, will not be happy about that prediction. He'll as soon as they win 10 games, he's going to remind me every game over 3 that they won. So,
well, I see it about the same at the top. I've got Washington also at 10-7. Yeah, I think, Fitzmagic always makes it interesting. They're going to be a more exciting team for sure than they were last year. And there's some great talent there. Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel. So I think there's going to be a lot of fun things happening on offense in Washington. The defense is great. I think there will be inconsistency enough that they won't be a 13-4 type of team, but I think a strong division winner. Cowboys, Dak is back, but the defense is still really bad. So I think they're going to struggle a little bit. 8-9 is what I'm projecting for them. I have the Eagles at 6-11, so not quite as bad as you. The Jalen Hurts, Devonta Smith combination, I think, will develop over the course of the year. My son is a really big Jalen Hurts fan, and we've got him on our fantasy team. So we've got to see him perform. I don't think it's going to be a great season. They still have a talent gap they've got to fill in. And the Giants, likewise, Daniel Jones is just not the answer. I think they're going to be drafting their quarterback next year. I'm going to say 4-13 for the Giants.
So now we have all of our predictions made. So I'll go with the 7 teams, I think, in the AFC that I think will make the playoffs. I have Buffalo at 1, KC at 2, the Steelers 3, Titans 4, Ravens 5, Patriots 6, and Chargers 7. And in the AFC, I have the Patriots pulling off a wild card upset over the Steelers, Kansas City beating the Chargers, and then the Titans defeating the Ravens. That would leave us with divisional games where the Bills beat the Patriots, the Titans beat the Chiefs, and in the championship game, the Bills move on to the Super Bowl by defeating the Titans. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, well, I've got a pretty similar list in terms of the 7 teams in the playoffs. The only one that's different for me is I've got the Ravens rather than the Steelers. I do have the Chiefs as the first seed with Bills second, followed by Baltimore, Tennessee, Cleveland, New England, and the Chargers. Wild card round. So I also have the Patriots pulling off an upset, this time over the Ravens, Titans beating the Browns, and the Bills beating the Chargers. Unfortunately, like you, I don't see the Patriots getting past the Bills in the divisional round. So Bills beat them, and then Chiefs beat the Titans. But the Bills, likewise, I see going to the Super Bowl over the Chiefs. So it'll be exciting in northern New York.
That's right. So we both have Buffalo going to the Super Bowl.
Yep.
Well, in the NFC, I have the Rams at 1, the Vikings 2, the Washington football team 3, the Buccaneers, disappointing 4th seed, Arizona 5, the Cowboys 6, and the Saints 7. In the wild card round, I have the Vikings defeating the Saints, the Washington football team over the Cowboys, and the Buccaneers defeating the Cardinals. Divisional games, Rams over Tampa Bay and the Washington football team over the Vikings. So I really have Fitzmagic working some magic.
Serious magic. Yeah.
Some serious magic that runs out in the NFC championship game. Aaron Donald has a way of doing that. The Rams defeat the Washington football team and go on to the Super Bowl where they'll play the Bills. How about you?
Yeah, this is where we have some differences. I have the Bucs as the number 1 seed, Rams 2nd, Packers 3rd, Washington 4th, followed by Seattle, New Orleans, and Minnesota. In the wild card round, I've got the Rams over the Vikings, Packers over the Saints, and Seahawks over Washington. And then in the divisional round, Bucs and Rams win. Bucs over the Seahawks, Rams over the Packers. Sets up a Rams-Bucs championship game, a reminder of the Super Bowl from a couple of years ago when Brady was on the Patriots. But this time it goes the other way, in my view. Rams beat the Bucs, likewise go on to the Super Bowl against the Bills, and I have them winning the Super Bowl over the Bills. So Matthew Stafford becomes the missing piece that takes that offense to a new level and allows the Rams to get over the top with their great defense.
Well, I don't like when this happens, but I have to agree with you. I have the Rams beating the Bills as well. So if we both get the Rams and Bills there, then the Matthew Stafford fan base is going to be happy, and the Bills are going to go on to another Super Bowl loss.
That's right. I know that'll be rough. Yeah, I'd have a 5th loss on their record there. But we'll see. You know, it does feel a little uncomfortable having the same prediction here. And, you know, there's always some surprises with the NFL. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of things we get wrong. Maybe a few we'll get right, and we'll have fun keeping track of it along the way.
Exactly.
Well, that'll do it for this week's show. Thanks, as always, for listening. Please remember to subscribe and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget, you can contact us at democracyinamericatoday@gmail.com. We look forward to talking to you again soon.